Resistance, resistance, resistance. Like I told you, I want to be greeting you with peace. So in my heart, you know that it's peace. But for the people, we must promote resistance at this point in time. So welcome to politics as usual with your boy Juice Runner, Old York Clay. And don't forget to check out my book, Street Skelzy. Wait, it's coming up now. Street Skelzy, knock 'em out the box. And if you want to support the channel, go to some Junkies Apparel and pick up some stuff. Now, you can support either through buying the book or just picking up a little something, something. I don't ask for any personal money where you just send it to me. I want to make sure that you always walk away with something outside of the information. I want you to have something. You can buy it 1,000 times if you want, pass it around and let everybody be a part of the movement. Right? Okay, so we left off with Highland and Islands. We're gonna take it back to this, so it's just a real short thing. We just gonna read that and continue on to theory of monarchy. Okay, so let's slide over here. All right. So as you can see, Highland and Islands. Oh, by the way, as you can see, I marked it all the way down to the curb right here. All right. Anyway, something I just did. Don't for me. Don't pay no attention to it. Don't worry about it. And my mic, the guard, I don't know where it went. I don't know. Been looking around for it, so forgive, the wind until I get a new one. I'm about to purchase one later on today. So, Highland and Islands. The forcible dissolution of the lordship of the Isles by King James IV in 1493 had led to troubled times for the western seaboard. He had subdued the organized military might of the Hebrides. If I say that wrong, forgive me. But he was immediate. But his immediate successor lacked the will or ability to provide an alternative form of governance. As a result, the 19th century became known as the time of raids. Furthermore, the effects of the Reformation were slow to affect the, people, driving a religious wedge between this area and centers of political control in the Central Belt. Right? In 1540, James V had toured the Hebrides, forcing the clan's chief to accompany him. There followed a period of peace, but the clans were soon at loggerheads with one another again. During King James VI's reign, the citizens of the Hebrides were portrayed as lawless barbarians, rather than being the cradle of Scottish Christianity and nationhood. Official documents describe the people of Highland as void of the knowledge and fear of God, who were prone to all kinds of barbarous and beastly cruelties. Keep that in mind when you think of their justification of using slavery. Because this is all around that same time. Think about that. Think about when they went into Australia and had, basically the Aboriginals over in that land wiped out. You know, push them all into a little corner and then basically act like they still in the way. All right? Just think of this stuff. Where we at? Void of God, beastly cruelties. The Gallic language spoken fluently by James the Fourth and probably by James the Fifth became known in the time of James the Sixth as Erse or Irish, implying that it was foreign in nature. The Scottish Parliament decided that Gaelic had become a principal cause of the Highlanders' shortcoming and sought to abolish it. Right? So you understand that the tactic was used on, yes, the Irish and this, that, and the third, but it's not in the same way. So when you hear these so-called Irish, oh yeah, you know, we were the niggers and this and we're black because of the, all of that is bogus. Don't fall for that lie. That's the reason why the police, you know, became Irish at one time and then they became the oppressors of the people. Don't be fooled by these lies. Is why I do this, to reveal the things. All right? Scottish gold coin. This is from 1609 to 1625. Right? It was against the background of King James VI authorized the gentleman's adventures of Fife to civilize the most barbarous Isles of Lewis. In 1598, James wrote that the colonists were to act not by agreement with the local inhabitants, but by extirpations of them. Exploitations of them. Extirpations, portions of whatever, man. I'm not gonna do this. You're not gonna make me feel bad, okay? Their landing in Stonewall began well, but the colonists were driven out by local forces commanded by Murdoch and Neil McLeod. The colonists tried again in 1605 with the same results, although the third attempt in 1607 was more successful. The Statutes of Lona were enacted in 1609, which required clan chiefs to provide support of Protestant ministers in highland parishes. Right. It also required them to basically start learning in these Scottish schools so they could erase the Gaelic language. They felt like this were the things that was keeping them separate because they had their own language. They could communicate and deal with each other separately. That's why it was mandatory for the African people to not have any education for a X amount of time. It wasn't about they didn't want you to read. They didn't want you to be able to communicate in your native tongue. So all they did was install this into you through the years. And so by the time you was let into the public school system, the 60s, right? I believe the 60s, you look at that time frame in the 1960s, 50s or 60s, right? You was allowed to go to school. In public school and their schools, right? Before then, you was separated and they dictated what you learned. That's just a fact, right? Their landing, Stonewall, okay, began status of Leon. That's when I just told you that, which required clans chiefs to provide support for Protestant ministers to highland parishes, to outlaw bards. There was also outlawing begging and a whole bunch of other things. You could just go right here into the status of Lona, and you could see that, right? You could read the whole thing. I'm probably bring it up on a later time. It's real short. It's not something that you really need to spend a lot of time with, but it's always good to check out, right? Reports regularly in Edinburgh to answer for their actions and to send their heirs to Ludlow, Lowland, Scotland, to be educated in English speaking Protestant schools. So began a process specifically aimed at the extinction of the Gaelic language, the destruction of the traditional culture, and the suppression of its bearers. Okay? You see it right here. Extirpations, whatever, of the Gaelic language, right? The destruction of his traditions, of his traditional cultures, and the suppression of its bearers. So this was how they, the Irish tried to associate themselves with us in our oppression. But they didn't lose. Those are just certain groups within, right? You can do the reading and you'll find out. In the Northern Isles, James' cousin Patrick Stewart and Earl of Orkney resisted the status of Lona and was consequently imprisoned. His natural son Robert led an unsuccessful rebellion against James, and Earl and his sons were hanged. Their estates were forfeited, and the Orkney and Shetland Islands were annexed to the crown. Like I said, this is the same tactic that they used with the Native Americans. This is the same tactics they used, all around. The Caribbean Isles, the Virgin Isles. These were the same tactics used. Right? Theory of monarchy. James wrote this. In 1597 through 98, James wrote The True Law of Free Monarchy. Please pay attention to the word free. All right? Let me put that there. All right? See that. Free monarchy. Remember, this whole thing is showing you Freemasonry. So understand that this whole time, I'm not just giving you a history lesson. This is all relevant to Freemasonry. I already explained to you Edinburgh is where the first, Freemasonic lodge is acknowledged to come from. All right. So we understand that you have the Scottish Rite and you got the York Rite. So right now we are just covering the Scottish Rite. We haven't touched the York Rite per se. Okay. Royal gift, in which he argued that theology basis for monarchy. In the true law, he sets out the divine right of the kings, explaining the kings are higher beings than other men for biblical reasons. Though the highest branch of the slaughters. Let me see if this is a different word. Okay. To sit upon. The document proposed the abolished theory of monarchy by which a king may impose new laws by royal progressives, but must also pay heed to traditions and to God, who would stir up such scourgings and pleaseth him. I guess this is supposed to be that old English, you know what I'm saying? For punishment of wicked kings, right? Where it goes, this is, Dargan was written as a book of instructions for 4-year-old Prince Henry. All right, bring that up there so you can see Prince Henry. Well, anyway, Prince Henry provides a more practical guide to kingship. The work is considered to be well written and perhaps the best example of James Preuss. James' advice concerning Parliament, which he understood as merely the king's head court, foreshadowed his difficulties with the English Commons. Hold no Parliament, he tells Henry, but for the necessity of new laws. I guess it's with the E at the end. Necessities, right? Of new laws. I just fixed that. Like I said, this is taken from Wikipedia, and so I'm just, if it got misspellings and all of that, Word is gonna tell me, and so I try to fix it. Anyway, which would be seldom, right? That should be seldom, right? Which should be seldom. And the true law. James maintained that the king owned his realm as a feudal lord owns his fief, whatever. Because kings arose before any estate or rank of men, before any parliaments were holden, the laws made and by them was the lands distributed, which at first was wholly theirs. And so it followed the necessity that kings were the authors and makers of the laws and not the laws of the kings. I hope you understand that, right? Before the estates or ranks of men, before any parliaments were holden, or laws made, and by them was the land distributed, which at first was wholly theirs. And so it followed of necessity that kings were the authors and makers of the laws, and not the laws of the kings. All right. Literary patronage, right? And in the my fault. In the 1580s and 90s, James promoted the literature of his native country. He published his treaties, some rules and continuance to be observed and eschewed in Scottish prosperity, right? Scottish, all right. And where we at? In 1584, at the age of 18, let me see if I can just remove my. No, that's the background. I'm gonna fix that on the back when I come back. Where we at here? Native tongue of the Scots. Applying Renaissance. Wait. In 1584, at the age of 18, he was both a poetic manual. It was both a poetic manual and a description of the poetic traditions of his mother language of Scots. Applying Renaissance principles, he also made statutory provisions to reform and promote the teaching of music, seeing the two in connection. Right, right. So before we go on, I just wanted to, you know, not explain, but take the time to reflect on certain things, right? When we was talking about hypnotism and mesmerism, right? We explained how Mozart and these people, you know, Mesmer, right, was cool with them and how music played a role within the hypnotic suggestions, right? So remember, King James also issued a decree where he was investigating to see if this system was real. So he was aware of the music elements and these things as well. So this is where we just gonna continue at. I just wanted to put that in there just so you would know. All right. So he also made statutory provisions to reform and promote the teaching of music, seeing the two in connection. One act of his reign urged the Scottish boroughs to reform and support the teachings of music and sang scholias, whatever. But we get the point, right? To reform, right? And support the teachings of music. In furtherance of these aims, he was both patron and head of a loose circle of Scottish Jacobean court poets and musicians known as the Castilian Band, which included William Fowler and Alexander Montgomery, among others. Montgomery being a favorite of the king, James was himself a poet and was happy to be seen as a practicing member of the group. By the late 1590s, his companions of native Scottish tradition was reduced to some extent by the increasing likelihood of his succession to the English throne. William Alexander and other courtier poets started to allegorize, yeah, allegorize their written language and followed the king to London after 1603. James Rowe was active literary participant and patron made him a defining figure in many respects for English Renaissance poetry and drama, which reached a pinnacle of achievement in his reign. All right. See that right there. All right. Patreon. You get the point. All right. In his reign. But his patrons of his high style in the Scottish tradition, which included his ancestors James I of Scotland, became largely sidelined. It's confusing, right? Like here it is, you're promoting this Scottish tradition and you're taking it. You don't go back to Scotland. You don't keep, I mean, he goes back, but later on, right? He didn't keep his every 3 year promise. He basically shits on them. He says, he give it up a stone bed, and we're going to get into that, right? That stone bed matters very much, believe it or not, for a feathery bed. So we're going to, move on. A session in England, right? That's just a picture. Like this is the two crowns, the two lands united, just like how the two crowns of the upper and lower valley of the Nile, upper and lower Nile Valley, the two kingdoms united, and that's how you got Egypt, right? Okay, from 1601 to the last years of Elizabeth's life, certain English politicians, notably her chief minister, Sir Robert Cecil, maintained a secret correspondence with James to perhaps to prepare in advance for a smooth succession. With the Queen clearly dying, Cecil sent James a draft proclamation of his accession to the English throne in March of 1603. Elizabeth died in the early hours of the 24th of March, and James was proclaimed king in London later the same day. All right. On the 5th of April, James left Edinburgh for London. This is what I was telling you before, promising to return every 3 years, a promise that he did not keep. He progressed slowly southward. Local lords received him with lavish hospitality along the route, and James was amazed by the wealth of his new land and subjects, claiming that he was swapping a stony couch for a deep feathered bed. James arrived to the capital on the 7th of May, 9 days after Elizabeth's funeral. His new subjects flocked to him to see him, relieved that the secession had triggered neither unrest nor invasion. On arrival at London, he was mobbed by a crowd of spectators. Right? His English coronation took place on the 25th of July in Westminster Abbey, with elaborate allegories provided by dramatic poets such as Thomas Dekker and Ben Jonson. An outbreak of plague restricted festivals, but the streets seemed paved with men. Now, I need you to pay attention to that, right? Because if you see right now, we going through this plague, right? New plagues and all of this, people staying in. But remember when George Floyd, right? Remember what happened, and then you see this world globally coming out at one time, right? All it is to set a new religious figure. You won't know it, right? Because it's happening. Like, you heard people say, the new Bible is being written as we speak, right? So the events that you see taking place, you have to wonder, are they being aligned with certain things? Now, if you went into my episode when I was talking about how they made Julius Caesar Jesus Christ, you would see the same things happening now. Certain moons, the the comet, Halley's Comet, and these things are taking place, but those things have a cycle, right? You see the planets lining up and you see all of these things. And so those are things that are not controlled by us, right? But they are documented. And so people know when these time frames come along. So that's when they are able, these cults, a Freemasonic cults, the same people, the same Freemasonic, not the name, but the same mentality and tactics used to make Jesus and his cults, right? The Julius Caesar cults, there are cults right now doing the same thing, right? So you just got to understand that. So when I point out certain things, it's not just to give you this long, unnecessary history. All of these things, like if it's not really important, as far as what the context of what I'm offering, I can, basically go past it. So if you see me taking this time, it's for a reason, wrote Decker. Stalls instead of rich wares were set out with children, open casements filled with women, right? The kingdom to which James succeeded, however, had its problems. Monopolies and taxations had engendered a widespread sense of grievance, and the cost of war in Ireland had become a heavy burden on the government, which had debts of £400,000. Right? Remember that part right here. War in Ireland. Right? Right? So we see that there is no confusion. Right? Early reign in England. And that's a portrait of King James looking like one of them swashbucklers, right? I think that's King James. Portrait after John's. Oh, this is John D. Kurtz. James, well, that's James. Wears a 3 brother jewels right here. 3 rectangular, right? That's up here, right? And the jewels the jewels is now lost. Oh, that's messed up. James survived 2 conspiracies in the first year of his reign, despite the smoothness of the succession and the warmth of his welcome. The Bay Plot and Main Plot, which led to the arrest of Lord Cobham and Sir Walter Raleigh, among others. Those hoping for a change in government from James were disappointed at first when he kept Elizabeth's privy councillors, right, in office as secretly planned with Cecil. But James only added longtime support. James added longtime supporters Henry Howard and his nephew Thomas Howard to the Privy Council, as well as 5 Scottish nobles. Right? We are gonna cover, right, the Bay Plot in the Main Plot. Trust and believe we will be coming back to these 2 subjects right here. Let me bold this for y'all. All right. In the Main Plot. So we will be coming back to these. All right. Don't fear not. Those will be touched upon. Which led to the arrest of, Privy Office. Right. Secretly planned, right, Scottish nobles. In the early years of James' reign, the day-to-day running of the government was tightly managed by the shrewd Cecil, later Earl of Cecilbury. ably assisted by the experienced Thomas Egerton, whom James made Baron Ellesmere Lord Chancellor, and by Thomas Sackville, soon Earl of Dorset, who continued as Lord Treasury. As a consequence, James was free to concentrate on bigger issues, such as a scheme for a closer union between England and Scotland, and matters of foreign policies, as well to enjoy his leisure pursuits, particularly hunting. Forgive me if I stopped. It's raining. I just, sometimes I be thinking, you know, whatever. Okay. James was ambitious to build on the personal union of the crown of Scotland and England to establish a single country under one monarch, one parliament, and one law. A plan that met oppositions in both realms. Hath he not made us all in one island? James told the English Parliament, compassed with one sea and of itself by nature indivisible. In April 1604, however, the Commons refused his request to be titled King of Great Britain. No. Yeah, Queen. I said Queen. King of. Pardon me here. I don't know why my mouse is giving me a problem. All right. Okay. King of Great Britain. On legal grounds. In October 1604, he assumed the title of King of Great Britain instead of King of England. All right. And King of Scotland. So now you know where Great Britain comes from. I tell people all the time, when you look at Game of Thrones, right? Understand that Game of Thrones is just basically this whole story. Right? When they go in the name of the queen, understand, that when you look at what's the redheaded girl, she was supposed to be, representing, the island. So when they all signed, remember, she stayed off to the side. Like, she's like, yeah, we be cool and all of that, but I'm just doing me. Pay attention to these things, right? Sir Francis Bacon told him that he could not use the style in any legal proceedings, instruments, or assurance. And the title was not used on English statutes. James forced the Parliament of Scotland to use it, and it was used in proclamation, coinage, letters, and treaties in both realms. James achieved more success in foreign policies. Never having been at war with Spain, he devoted his efforts to bringing the long Anglo-Spanish War to an end. Right? So when we hear Anglo-Saxon, we associate that with just being white. Right? This is like when sometimes I listen to Star, and he addresses this, like, we see certain people, oh, you not white, this is what he is referring to, where we at, Anglo-Saxon War to an end, and peaceful treaty was signed between the two countries in August 1604. Thanks to the skilled diplomacy of the delegations, in particular Robert Cecil and Henry Howard, now Earl of Earl of Northampton. So remember again, like I said, you watch the Game of Thrones. I would do that, with y'all, but we do that another time. But after you watch the Game of Thrones and you look at these titles and you follow the story, and you will understand. James celebrated the treaty by hosting a great banquet. Freedom of worship of the Catholics in England, however, continuing to be a major objective of Spanish policies, causing constant dilemmas for James, distrusted abroad for repression of Catholics, while at home being encouraged by the Privy Council to Right. So we back at it. Forgive me, I wasn't looking at the clock time. Let me put the screen over here so I can see my ticker. All right, okay. My clock countdown. All right. So we're over here. And like I said, I was just breaking down. If you take the time and you look at, the Game of Thrones, even G.I. Joe. It might sound crazy, but even the G.I. Joe cartoon, not the movie per se, but the cartoon, you will see all of this history being laid out to you. Right? James celebrated the new treaty by hosting a great banquet. Freedom of worship for Catholics in England, however, continued to be a major objective of Spanish policies, causing constant dilemmas for James, distrusted abroad for repression of Catholics, while at home being encouraged by a Privy Council to show even less tolerance towards them, right? So we understand that King James and them were not Catholics, right? They were Protestants. So we understand that we have two wars going on here. So when we say in America, oh, this is a Christian state and all of that, and then we see Freemasonry come in and attack it, right? Understand what's going on here. The gunpowder plot. All right, let me put this in my header for y'all. All right. Change my headline. All right. All right. Just grab. I just like having a little something in the floating by at the bottom here. Just in case somebody walks in, they can be up to speed. Okay. We had the gunpowder plot, right? A descendant Catholic, Guy Fawkes, was discovered in a cellar of the Parliament building on the night of 4 5, of 4th or the 5th of November 1605. the eve of the state opening in the second season of James' first English Parliament. He was guarding a pile of wood not far from 36 barrels of gunpowder. Some politicians, scared of Catholics, assumed folkies intended to use the barrels to blow up Parliament House the following day and cause the destruction. Right? Understand that. Right? Because we still see these tactics today. Right? 36 barrels of gunpowder. Remember when we had the riots and you see the stacks of bricks just to magically appear out of nowhere? Okay. Some politicians scared of Catholics assumed Forky's intentions to use the barrels to blow up Parliament House the following day and cause the great destruction, as James put it. Not only of my person, nor my wife in positivity also, but the whole body of the state in general. The sensational discovery of the gunpowder plot, as it quickly became known, aroused a mood of national relief at the delivery of the king and his son. Salisbury exploited this to extract high subsides from the ensuing parliament than any but one granted by Elizabeth. Folsky and other implicated minorities were tortured and executed. All right. Want to put minorities for y'all. Tortured. Oh, my fault. I ain't even on the other board. My fault, people. All right. So you see over here, all right, got the 36 barrels that I highlighted for you. All right. Then we got minorities were tortured and executed. All right. So then we go. I'm looking at the time. Got 14 minutes. Okay. The big plot of 1603 was a conspiracy by Roman Catholic priests. All right, I want y'all to see this. So when we over here involving ourselves with their problems, we don't understand, right? We embrace stuff that has nothing to do with us. The Roman Catholic priests and Puritans aiming at tolerance for their respective denominations to kidnap the new king, English king, James I of England. And it's referred to as the Bay Plot because at the time it was present as a minor component of a larger plot called the main plot. Like I said, we're gonna get into that. I just want, that's why I highlighted this, brought that in there so you could know. All right, background. The Anglo-Spanish War had been continued for nearly 2 decades, with fighting at sea in the Netherlands and Ireland. Elizabeth I of England died in the end of March 1603, and James VI of Scotland claimed the English throne without overt opposition. In England and Wales, and substantially number of Catholics were subject to fines if they did not attend Church of England services, right? Where it says here, in England and Wales, a substantial number of Catholics were subject to fines if they did not attend Church of England services under a system of penal law. English Catholics protested loyalty to the crown and wished the legal constraints of their worship relaxed. Right? They were ministers. Okay, they were ministers to by priests, both the Society of Jesus and other religious orders achieved in England and as a mission, and seminars priests and others not in religious orders, right? Secular priests and legal positions of these priests were unclear. Right, I think I should probably go through that again. Okay, it goes, English Catholic priests loyal to the crown and wished a legal constraint on their worships relaxed. They were ministered by priests, both the Society of Jesus and other religious orders active in England as a mission, and seminar priests and others not in religious orders, secular priests. The legal position of these priests was unclear. All right, so we got division among English Catholics. All right. We could put this over here. All right. Go to the headline. Page 2 in there. Go to the ticker. All right. Yes. Grab you. Put you up in here. All right. All right. So, division among English Catholics. A division quarrel and pamphlet war among English Catholics and archpriest conservative had in 1603 been continuous for about 5 years. The results alignment of Catholic priests had a great deal to do with making the plot of the 1603 impractical, and also made one side of the argument receptive to the idea of informing the London government. Right, William Watson took the appellate side of the archpriest conservative, hostile to George Blackwell, who had been appointed by the Holy See, right? Useful to the English government and church for its diplomatic. Watson was under the protection of Richard Bancroft when then Bishop of London. In September 1603, Watson was resident at Fulham Palace. In 1602, he was confined to the Clink, but kept in close touch with Bancroft. The plot was initially exposed by the archpriest Blackwell and 2 Jesuits, John Gernard and Henry Gardet, right, who were on the other side of the dispute. These 3, by independent routes, passed on information they had relating to the conspiracy. They had other reasons besides the ongoing controversy. They feared retribution against Catholics if the plan failed, and entertaining suspicious regards of political motivation of the secular priest, right? So then we're going to get into the plotters. Now this is all, actually I shouldn't have changed that because this is all still a part of the same thing. So it goes. The plot was known as Watson's plot. The Catholic plot, the suppressing treason, or the treason of the priests. Those involved were not, in fact, exclusively Catholic priest. Hold on. It goes, I don't know if y'all heard that, but it goes, those involved were not, in fact, exclusively Catholic priests. Thomas Gray, 15 Baron Gray Dare Wilson, was a Puritan layman who became drawn in, though the plot never went further than far-fetched discussion. Another lay conspirator was Sir Griffin Markham. While they may have had in common a wish for religious tolerance, their motivations were veered. Watson wished to have no more finds of recessory levied. Another plank in the platform of the Bay plot was the removal of certain ministers of the king. To the extent that these matters can be classified the main plot that had been laid in parallel wishes also for Regum's change, with James replaced on the throne by Abriella Stewart. All right, so here we go. I think that's spelled wrong. Yeah, I don't know. I think I just keep it the way it was because it just removed it. Events. All right. Events of 16. We got 5 minutes. 1603. King James moved south at a leisure pace, having reached Thorold House, the Hertfordshire, on the 3rd of May. The scheme, such as it was, depended on Markham's views in May that there was a Scottish precedent for seizing the person of the king for particular advantage. It was in late May or early June on, Gerald's own account that someone, probably Markham, tried to recruit the Jesuit John Gerard. Gerard's reaction was negative, and he wrote to Henry Garnet and George Blackwell, asking them to put a spoke in the wheels of the plot. June. All right. The date set by Watson for the plot to be carried out was the 24th of June. This was St. John's Baptist Day and the Collar Day. In the planning of the plot, its significance was that curities would be at court and regaled ceremonially. Right? At the date in midsummer approach, Garland had contracted a Scottish courtier asking that he make the king aware, while also Blackwell, the official head of the English Catholic secular clergy operating from hiding, took roundabout steps. Blackwell's communication outran Gerard's. Blackwell revealed something of the plot to the government through its intermediary, the recent John Gage, who had married Margaret, the daughter of Sir Thomas Copley. When Gage wrote to Sir Robert Cecil on the 28th of June, Cecil was already aware of the plot. The Catholic returned exile and conspirator Anthony Copley had also written to Blackwell about the Bay plot. He was Sir Thomas Copley's son and therefore Gage's brother-in-law. Blackwell had written to Gage. Cecil assumed there was something more behind these exchanges, so that he asked Gage to produce Blackwell before the council. It has been suggested that Copley continuously played the double agent. In the event, Lord Grey withdrew ahead of the day and the plotters scattered. Got a minute left. Let me see if we can get into this. July. A significant arrest was made of George Brooke, who was in the Tower of London in July. Markham and Brooke wanted to supplement current members of the Privy Council. Henry Brooke, 11th Baron Cobham, right, was his brother and a conspirator in the more serious main plot. Sir George was arraigned in 15th of July, and his eagerness to clear himself made confessions that clarified to the investigators that two separate groups of plotters had been active. On the 16th July, a proclamation was issued for Watson's arrest. Bancroft at around this time had good reason to distance himself from Watson and claimed he had not seen him since about the Queen's death. The Queen died. Right? Oh, taking a break. So I'm hoping y'all see that this is a war of the minds, right? So as we look at these findings, like I told you, Freemasonry is an attack. If you know anything about Freemasonry, you know that it's an attack on religion, right? So you also know that it's revealing in one way while concealing in another, right? So if you are not aware of these things, I hope now you are. I hope you are starting to see where this is all going. Even though we could say, yeah, King James Bible and this, that, and the third, it was already designed for the takedown of one system, the Catholic Church, right? That's why you see the Pope and all of them, all of this, the plot to take them down while bringing in their own. And you got to remember, King James, went into Satanism. Not like I say Satanism, but demonology, right? He went to the dark side. He even, put out his own book on it, right? So we do have this understanding of these two sides, right? Okay. So let's go over here. All right, July. A significant arrest was A significant arrest was of Sir George Brooke, who was in the Tower of London. No, I already read that. It goes King James coronation went ahead on the 25th of July. His name day for James the Greater was planned. His ceremonial entry into London, however, was postponed until March the 16th, 1604, for reasons including the plague, and at the time Westminster did not form a part of London. All right, I just want to say, pay attention. The plague. Right? August. Watson was arrested around the 5th of August in a field by the River Way near Hay-on Way on the border of England and Wales. He made a confession about the plot dated 10 August. William Clark, another priest who had been an active organizer, was arrested in Worcester, Worcester, whatever. And the 13th of August. Remember, man, I'm not here to get their pronunciations right. That's not my fucking agenda. It's supposed to be a foreign tongue to me, and I'm not even gonna entertain some of it. You know what I'm saying? November. Further details of the Bay plot were revealed by the Catholic priest Francis Barnaby in prison. He was another apparent contact of Bancroft, who communicated for him while Christopher let me turn this down. Bradshaw in his work with the plotter William Clark against English Jesuits. All right. Let me read that again. Further details of the Bay plot were revealed by the Catholic priest Francis Barnaby in prison. He was another appellant contact of Bancroft, who communicated with him with Joseph Bagshaw and had worked with the plotter William Clark against English Jesuits. The court had moved to Watson's house near Salisbury in Warwickshire. There it was decided that trials could be conveniently be held at the Bishop's Palace in Winchester, not very far away. These trials took place from the 15th to the 18th of November. John Lingard, in his History of England, attributed the details to the continued presence in the country of Charles D. and Prince of Araberg was there to represent the Spanish Netherlands as James' coordinator. And the alleged contact of the main plot with him were potentially embarrassing. On the 15th, the two Catholic priests involved, Sir George Brooke and Sir Griffin Markham, and others were tried. On the 17th, Sir Walter Riley was tried, and the prosecution managed to make a case that he had been involved in the Bay plot. Lord Grey, as a baron, was tried and found guilty by 31 peers on the 18th of November, with Lord Cobham, who was implicated in the main plot. Guilty verdicts on the conspirators were reached. The only adequately on the high treason charges among the Bay plot defendants were Sir Edward Parham, Sir Edward Coates, prosecution case for Riley's involvement in the Bay plot was tenuous and um, radical, right? Heavy on personal abuse, but Riley role in the perhaps I don't know, of the plot left him with much to explain. The two priests, Watson and Clark, were executed for their parts in the scheme on the 29th of November. This is how you break a people, right? Because a lot of people who just want to do things in the dark, right? The other ones who's with you might not necessarily be with you. And so they can give up the whole plot. Now remember, these are people who supposed to believe in God, right? And they're doing this in the name of God, but yet and still they couldn't hold it down. So go figure, right? December. A late competitor, George Brooke, was executed on the 5th of December. On the 10th of December, Lord Grey with Markham was taken to a scaffold, pardoned, and spent the rest of his life in the Tower of London's Jubilee Carlton, who witnessed the proceedings involving also Lord Carbon, took it to be a well-scripted drama of the King's mercy. In particular, Carlton concluded it was staged for the benefit of Riley, who had been caught up in the Bay plot charges. Aftermath. By an edict of 22nd of February 2004, King James ordered all Roman Catholic clergies, Jesuits, seminaries, and priests to leave his kingdom by March 19. His etiquette had been drafted in July of 2003 and on the discovery of the plots, right? Anthony Copley was condemned to death, but he was pardoned on the 18th of August, 1604, having made a full confession on the history of the plot. Right? So, once again, we understand, well, I hope we come to an understanding that this was an internal war, right, inside of their lands on God, the religion and, everything. Remember, these people knew the truth, right? They understood what was taking place with Julius Caesar. So they were moving in, right, to get rid of that, and still is, and so the first thing was to make sure that everybody had the King James Version of the Bible in their hand. Why? Because remember, Shakespeare and these people helped write it. So what is being done, they are allowed to place things in there. So when the smooth transition or the takeover, they could use these references. See right here where it says this and yada yada. So they can use all of this as an argument. Both people are playing with your intelligence. The Roman Catholic did no different from the Freemasonic Lodge. But my thing is, right, if the Catholic Church had any sense, they would sue, the what do you call them, the Satanic Church for sending in the gay pastors to destroy the Christian church. The Catholic. I'm not a Catholic. I'm not, you know what I mean? I'm not none of that. So I'm just an observer and a student. That's it. No more, no less. I'm just an observer and a student. And so, I'm giving you what was taking place. The takeover. What is still taking place. The takeover. Showing you how they made certain things go forward. It's not going to be easy. It wasn't going to be easy to take on the Catholic Church, as you see. So it took time for them to build this up. They'll tell you this is a Christian nation, right? But remember, even George Washington was a Freemason. So just because you might be breaking away from one thing, don't mean you really breaking away from it all. There's a lot in the United States, just in this structure, where we can do a breakdown, and I will, to show you everything. I've already told you, the filthy religion. Well, getting more into it, but we're showing you a development in a switching in a con of the mind. Whose mind? Your mind. You were the one that's being taken advantage of here. That's it. No more, no less. So I'm about to slide up out of here. You know what I'm saying? Until next time, hopefully tomorrow or the next day, but definitely within the next few days. All right? Resistance, people, resistance, resistance. That's all I could tell you. Keep your heads up. We out.